As you fly over the Caspian Sea, you can almost smell the oil. Every few hundred metres, another giant rig juts out of the water. Whole communities of oil workers and their families live at sea. For oil men like Bill Messerall, this is the new Persian Gulf.
There's a lot of it. I mean, by all accounts, you know, we're talking 100 to 200 billion barrels recoverable oil. That's a lot, and this is it's a mega area. I mean, it's huge.
For the past 4.5 years, Bill Messerall has divided his time between Texas and Azerbaijan, the former Soviet republic that straddles the Caspian Sea. A few years earlier, it would have been unthinkable for him to come here. Soviet pride and paranoia closed the oil fields to Western technology and expertise. Instead, they stumbled on with Soviet inefficiency to exploit a fraction of the area's oil. Now, Azerbaijan is an independent nation, and the oil fields are open for business. At this rig, Bill Messerall's team is installing a filtration system to stop the pump becoming clogged by sand. It's standard technology on Western rigs, but it's such an advance for here, it's expected to double the rig's output. When the Caspian Sea's full potential is tapped, its oil fields are likely to yield more petrodollars than Kuwait's.
This is one of the last great frontiers. We will never be repeating what's going on ever again. I'll never be able to repeat it in my career. It won't happen, or anybody else's, because this is one of the last true frontiers.
The centre of this frontier is Azerbaijan's capital, Baku. The town hasn't seen this much foreign activity for 80 years.
The whole building was constructed by the greediest Azeri oil baron, Musa Nagiev. But though he was the stingiest one, he built the biggest number of excellent houses in Baku.
Fuad Ahundov is a Baku policeman who makes his best money moonlighting as a tour guide for visiting oil executives. But the boom he's describing began more than a century before he was born. In 1852, Baku became the centre for the world's first oil industry, making millions for the Nobels, the Rothschilds, and even some fortunate locals. So how rich a town was Baku?
It was an immensely rich city. Because it was the time when an oil gusher, and Baku was famous for marvelous oil fountains, could make an owner of a small piece of land a millionaire overnight. And actually Baku was providing more than half of the world output in oil by 1901.
Only a minority became rich from the first boom, and today less than a handful survive. Fuad took me to meet Baku's last oil aristocrats. Sarah, Marian and Adelia Azherbekov are all approaching their centenaries, but they've retained the manners and even language of their upper-class education.
I understand English, but I speak well French.
Vous parlez français?
Oui, sans doute.
Comment est-ce que vous parlez français?
L'école française à Istanbul.
Vraiment? Their home is a crumbling Soviet apartment, but 80 years ago they lived in Baku's finest mansion.
Ну, мой отец был крупный нефтепромышленник. У него было много промыслов по всему Апшерону. Потом несколько домов было. Мы жили в очень шикарном доме, вы знаете этот дом. Вот. И бабушка всегда золото, жемчуг. Видите, тут...
In 1920, the Bolsheviks shot their father and took everything they'd owned. They fled to Turkey to live in poverty. A few years later, they decided it was safe to return home, but they found the communists would never welcome back the children of an oil baron.
Конечно, даже тут же на улицу выкинули все наши вещи, сказали, это вам не принадлежит, это наше. Понимаете?
Большие дома конфисковали. Государство все брало, дачи, потом эти дома большие. Все богача большие дома захватил
Подожди, Аделя,
государство.
молчи. Она дала нам 3 комнаты, было у нас 10 комнат, стало 3.
The communist authorities turned a thriving private oil boom into a Soviet monolith.
It couldn't be an oil boom in the Soviet days because we never owned any revenues from oil. The revenues were alienated by the state. We were paid very low sum, which sometimes didn't even cover the expenses.
The oil was crucial to propping up the Soviet Union, but it brought little benefit to Baku's citizens, except perhaps for corrupt officials at the local party machine. But now there are new oil barons and new hopes of oil fortunes. So far, 5 consortiums of foreign oil companies have signed contracts totalling $22 billion in direct investment. The largest, AIOC, has already paid more than $1.5 billion, and the first oil is only just beginning to flow. Terry Adams, an Englishman who heads the consortium, is confident the boom could eventually mean better times for all.
What we're looking at is, as I said, 2 North Seas to support a very well-educated population, but a population equivalent to the size of London. So the opportunity for prosperity is extremely high as long as political stability comes into the region.
The man they're looking to for stability is the president, Haydar Aliyev. In true Soviet style, all other traffic has to stop whenever he travels. And no one is more of an old Soviet than Aliyev. In the 1980s, he was Azerbaijan's Communist Party boss, a KGB general and an ultra-conservative Politburo member until he was sacked by Gorbachev. Now he's back in charge as a born-again pro-Western Azeri nationalist and a man the oil companies can do business with.
I like this photograph best because he's a very, very open, he's a person with a big sense of humor.
Vaza Goulizade is his spokesman and foreign policy advisor. That's your favourite photo of the president?
Yes, it's my favorite photo of the President Aliyev. I think that it is his real nature.
He assured me that world leaders were just as enamoured of the former communist strongman.
President Aliyev, a very progressive person. He has very huge respect. He is in very close touch with all the world, with all politicians of the world. He has huge respect from President Clinton, from President Kohl, from President Chirac. They are working with him. And they are fully convinced that he is a person with a very democratic mentality.
The Caspian Sea's oil reserves may have something to do with that respect. Last century, Russia and Britain fought the so-called Great Game, a mixture of war, diplomacy and subterfuge aimed at controlling Central Asia's trade routes. Today, the trade routes for oil are just as tempting and far easier to control. They're simply pipelines. The countries they run through could charge huge rents for transit, and if they wanted more, they could simply shut them down. Now, the very first oil will be carried out through the old pipeline that runs through Russia. But in the long term, they're going to have to build a huge new pipeline to carry this huge new flood of oil. And deciding which countries that goes through is the new great game, because controlling that pipeline would be like controlling the Persian Gulf. Russia insists the pipeline should be built alongside the existing route through Chechnya to the Black Sea. Iran wants the oil to flow south through its pipelines to the Persian Gulf. The United States wants neither Russia nor Iran to control the oil. It wants a new pipeline built through Turkey to the Mediterranean. Azerbaijan wants as many routes as possible.
Azerbaijan wants to have control for its own resources, and we don't want to be dependent to any state, to any country. For example, if we'll have many, we'll be able flexibly to send it through that route that is fitting our interests. We'll send it through all routes, but if somewhere we'll have difficulties, we'll use another route.
What's not clear is where this big power politics will leave ordinary Azeris. From Baku, their horizons are filled with oil rigs. After 3 generations slaving for Moscow with little reward for themselves, many are anxious to make up for lost time. The oil boom has given Baku a chance to be great again. But it's also raised expectations of an easy life in the sun as the oil money flows in. It won't be so simple. Most of the big new oil money, like the oil itself, is still a long way away, and it could be years before it trickles down to those who need it most. Outside Baku, Azerbaijan is experiencing a social catastrophe. From a population of 9 million, close to 1 million are homeless. They're all victims of a long-running war with neighbouring Armenia over the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. A ceasefire has ended the fighting, but Armenia occupies 20% of Azerbaijan's old Soviet territory and every one of the refugees' homes. Badam and her family of 7 were driven from Nagorno-Karabakh 5 years ago. The gold in her teeth is all the wealth she could bring with her.
Gelin bizim böyle şəraitimize baxın, nəyimizə baxın, eşiyimizə baxın, nəyimiz var hamısını qoyub gəlmişik. Ondan sonra bax hamısını yığdıq, bax ona qaldı kətdə. Özümüz də arazdan keçmişik, elə yarımız suda batdı, qırıldı, yarımız nə bilim elə arazından keçdik. Yağışda, qıyamatda gəldi, hamısı da xəstəlik tutdu. Vagonlarda yezdən hamısı, çadırlarda qırıldı qalmadı millətimiz. Buraya gelin bak bu da bizim şəraitimiz, nəyim var içərdə, bak bu da oğlanın qopanımda bak bunlar. Bir sürü də küflədi, ondan sonra.
The stench and heat in the railway carriage were almost unbearable, but they're lucky to have it as their home.
7 nəfər ailə yaşayır, elə burada qızımdı, özümdü, bir də bir oğlumdu, qılçasından yaralıdır. Elə bir vətənəllidir. O da oranı minib çıxa bilmirdi, düşə bilmir. İndi yollamışam, gedib də ola bir 10 gündə qardaş evində qalır, ailəsində götürüb gedib oturur.
The meagre help they get comes entirely from foreign aid donors. Not a cent of the oil millions paid to Azerbaijan has made its way to the refugees. President Aliyev insists they must one day return home and refuses to build them permanent dwellings. But, like the oil barons, Azerbaijan's poor must put their faith in Aliyev.
Allah Aliyev'e kömək dursun. Bizə kömək eləsin, bizim torpağımızı alsın, versin, gedək öz torpağımızı. Ancaq biz ümidimizi Aliyev'e bağlamışıq.
The Azerbekov sisters know they'll never return to their old home, even though it's only a few streets from where they live. and they have no faith in their ex-communist rulers sharing the oil wealth with the people.
Вряд ли.
No, hardly.
Почему?
Вряд ли. Потому что те люди, которые сделали богатым Баку, этих людей уже нет. Parce que la noblesse, les riches, on les tués, chassés, ils ne sont plus à Bakou.
Yet Baku is showing real signs of change. The advance guard of Western oil workers has brought in money and, for some, opportunity.
Baku, like it is now, is not what it used to be half a year ago, and not what it used to be a couple of years ago. The city is changing rapidly. The private property is bringing great changes to the image of the streets, to the mode of life. Well, the main thing to be changed is mentality of people, and it's the hardest thing to be changed because the Soviet mentality imposed for 3 generations requires at least 1 generation to get rid of. But even if you take mentality of people, the changes that are going here now within a year are equal to the changes you may have in the West for decades.
For decades, the Soviet Union failed to exploit the oil riches of Azerbaijan. Only a fraction of the oil was found, and what money was made went to Moscow. History is now giving Baku another chance. The first boom made a few people very rich. The Soviet years made almost everyone poor. The challenge this time is to benefit all.